Hello. Welcome to this week's episode of the Let Me Ask You This podcast. I am your host, E.B. Hepworth, and I start every episode by saying thank you for being here. It means so much. It's not lost on me that you could be anywhere in the world and that you're choosing to be here. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so excited because this week's episode is with my friend Christian Bevere. She is a mother, an author, an artist. She's one of those people that I swear just floats. I don't even think she walks. I think she just floats on through. She's breathtaking, and the way that she speaks, you just want to watch her speak. Like, she's just, everything about her is elegant and beautiful. And so, like I said, Christian is an author. She wrote a book called Break Up With What Broke You. She also is a podcast host and has a podcast called Dear Future Husband, which is kind of funny because we filmed an episode on her podcast right before we filmed this one. And so we got like 2 full hours together, which was such a gift. And so if you want to go, I'm going to put the show notes. If you want to go listen to that podcast, go ahead. I think you might love it. But Christian is so, so special. Gosh, I loved this conversation. We really got to just unpack, the concept of perfectionism versus really hard and holy work. And how do we not let that critical spirit that many of us artists have come and distort what we're working with. And so I think you're going to love this episode. And so without further ado, here is the episode with my friend Christian. Look at you. You're so beautiful.
You are so sweet.
You wake up like this?
This is the first time I'm wearing makeup in a week, being sick. So I was like, better. Oh, okay.
She's like, there she is. Oh, mama's back.
Hey, husband. I'm so sorry for blowing my nose a lot this week, but
Okay, so everyone, Christian is recovering from a brutal cold, and she is with us 8 months pregnant.
Yes, we are with you. We are here.
Oh my gosh. And I'm obviously assuming you have a name, but you're probably not sharing it until you birth it. So do you, yeah, I'm so glad. Yeah, I would never.
I'll tell you off air.
Totally. So are you feeling good? Like, what's it like being 8 months pregnant with your second and, chasing a toddler?
Yeah, the energy definitely, in the last 2 weeks, I'm officially 32 weeks, and my husband and brother-in-law joke. They're like, that is the time that something changes. I mean, biologically, your estrogen and your progesterone hit a peak. So yes, it does. But they're like, they're moody, they're tired. But I feel that. I'm like, okay, it's when things get real, baby starts doubling in size. I felt great up until
your head cold a week ago.
This is me being so honest, and the people that don't know me yet, take it or leave it. But we went to this event, and there's just so much small talk, and you get this as a 4 is like, I have to go deep, or like my social bar just drains, or like I start making small conversations big in my mind. And so after the 20th person each day being like, how are you? I was like, I'm fine. You know what? There's nothing wrong with me. And I'm just like, okay, maybe I'm not fine if I keep getting this upset. But all in all, it's been really good. It's getting real, but I'm excited for that. I think something about going through this a second time is you have the awareness of some of the things that are either fears or concerns the first times. Is like, no, this is a good milestone.
Yeah,
so I'm going to embrace it as such, or make it, even if it was the former.
Well, and this is your first pregnancy in Tennessee, right? Your last one was in Colorado, right?
We actually moved here right before we got pregnant.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's not. So I was going to say the sweatiness of just Tennessee pregnancy in summer. I feel for you.
Well, I was 9 months pregnant in July last time. So I'm looking forward to October.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Okay. Well, Christian, tell the people listening, tell us who you are. Give us a little Spark Notes version of how you've gotten to the season that you are currently in.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm honored just to get to share space with you in a place that's all about Jesus and authenticity. So thank you for stewarding that. For those that don't know me, I'm more than just a sick pregnant woman. I am a wife and a mom, of course. I am so honored to get to be an author and just get to share with people creatively. It's a way that I feel like I can understand and release the things that the Lord's spoken to me. It's how he speaks to me. So as much as I love doing it and sometimes think I'm good at it and sometimes think I'm terrible, I feel like it's a way of stewarding conversations and like releasing healing for people and just like an awareness of different ways that God operates and showing people they're not alone. So I love the chance that I get to do that and also share on a podcast called Dear Future Husband that Evie was just on quite literally like 20 minutes
Literally.
ago. And I like to encourage women. That's really, if I was going to put who I am, it is a redeemed version of my younger self. And I want to get to be that big sister, since I'm a big sister of three, to the women I meet, even if they're older than me, and just say, like, hey, God's not done with your story, whether that's in your relationship or it's in your redemption. Keep believing, keep going. That's kind of
I
my
love that.
mantra.
I love that. Okay, so you have been married for how long?
It'll be 6 years.
6 years. Okay, and then you have one son and one baby girl on the way.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you wrote a book. Tell us about your book, just so then we can jump right into the episode. Tell us all about your book.
Yeah, it released exactly a year ago tomorrow. So I've been refreshing my mind on what on earth did I write about as a natural progression or getting ready for this. But yeah, I wrote a book called Break Up with What Broke You, all about taking the things that we feel like are a part of our story that are just broken, or the things we've dealt with or are dealing with that are too all encompassing to who we are. That means, oh, well, I can never have the marriage that I want to have. I can never be the woman that I want to be because, I've dealt with this or I've done this. And to me, shame was so much of my inner story. You probably wouldn't know that as much as if you went to high school with me or, you grew up with me because, I like to internalize a lot of things. And I think, especially in this day and age, why we're seeing mental health and all of these other things come about is because people do that a lot more than we even readily admit to ourselves. Is we internalize these narratives. We believe the lies of the enemy. We believe that, our past is more powerful than our future. And I like to say that shame is an inability to separate what we've done from who we are. And so this book was a way of me releasing the lies that I believed, releasing the things I've done, and really just begin to believe, okay, God, you are the God of releasing our sins as far as the east is from the west. You're the God of reconciliation, of redemption. And I want to believe that you can do that in my story. I believe you could do it for, the heroes of the faith. But what about a 21st century woman that's just done like stupid things, or like believe stupid things about myself?
That's me.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. It's like, it's one thing when it's like, oh, David killed somebody and like God's got to do this and there's a priest and a prophet. But like, what about the girl that just made a mistake last Saturday night or constantly tells herself that, she's fat when she's beautiful? You know what I mean? Like the things that feel contrite. And um, it was a way of me saying, God, am I going to believe the story I'm telling myself or the story that you've written over me? And we talk about a couple of things in there, shame again being one of them, but like confidence and regret and, faith. And so this book was a chance for me to almost be peer to peer, like a coffee conversation
Love it.
with anyone that would read it and just say, hey, these are some of the things that I've been through. What have you been through? And this is the truth that's available to all of us. And these are some of the hurdles we have to get over to be able to
Mhm.
authentically, wholeheartedly, and fully believe those and see those take place. I also grew up in the Bible Belt where it's like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm struggling with my self-image, but I'm confident and I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. It's like, okay, yes, but like, has that gone from your head to your heart? Have you
Yeah.
digested that? Has that marinated within your soul completely? Because we can't just stop at hearing it. We have to be doers of the word, believers of the word, activators of the word. So
Yes.
those are
Yes.
my two big hurdles.
Oh, okay, guys, episode's done. Just kidding. Just preaching right off the get-go. Oh, okay. Well, there's so many things that come into mind, but I strongly believe, obviously, when you write a book about something, you have to live it, right? You are living it, you are walking in it. And then all of a sudden, there's this just fat target on your back. And then the enemy's
Oh
like, you
yeah.
wrote a book on this. So, for someone, because I know you don't ever fully graduate from insecurity, right? You don't ever, like, there's always going to be this new lie that the enemy tries to throw at you. So now, since writing this book, how do you conquer these lies? Like, what is the difference between putting a post-it note on an insecurity or a feedback loop of shame versus actually pleading the blood and actually like declaring this like captive setting us free truth? Like,
Mhm.
how do you actually like come to a place, and then you now a year ago writing this book, and then when a lie comes to you, how do you overcome that? How do you like
Mhm.
actually partner with God's narrative of who you are?
Yeah. There's so many things that I wanna say off the bat because they were the initial starting of that healing process, but I think the way you actually sustain it is not as an individual, it's in community, and we hear community a lot. I know I'm one of those people that's like, "Oh, that's great," but, like, for a long time, I didn't have the community I wanted, so that's not the answer I wanted, but the way that I walked through this journey, which I'll share some of that for the person that's like, "No, I wanna hear." But the way I walked through that, and then my husband has been able to reaffirm the things that I contested to believe. The women in my life have affirmed those things and called into being those things that I was still struggling to believe for, is really, I think, the meat of that becoming, well, it's not going to come up again because I'm not the only voice saying this. Like, I just think of walking around the city of Jericho, like the triumphant noise that came from an army saying the same thing, believing the same thing, contending for what is God's. It's like it wasn't just Joshua. Maybe I'm sure God could have done something with just Joshua walking around 7 times. Maybe he would have had to make it 77. But there's something in the chant and believing and looking to your side and thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to let fear be the voice in my head today. I'm not going to let that lie come back up because I'm hearing these other voices that are saying the same thing. So that to me is the most powerful
So good.
in sustaining something. But what I had to do was like get really real. And just being a woman and speaking authentically, there's so much that we want to dissect and like harbor on. Like we were talking in our conversation about like suffering and being downcast, and usually we're like, oh, we don't want to talk about those things. But in our inner narrative, we're totally fine with doing that. It's like, oh, well, I'm okay with thinking no one's ever going to want to be with me. I'm okay with thinking I'm not as beautiful as so and so. I don't know why we're so comfortable one realm of that, but not the other. I'm sure it's by the enemy scheme or fallen nature, but
Mhm.
we want to do that. We want to tell ourselves all the things wrong with us, all the things we've done wrong. And instead of believing that change is available, we just keep saying, oh, yeah, but remember this, or remember that, or look at that bad spot. You felt pretty yesterday, but that's only because you were wearing makeup. You know what I mean?
So
Insert whatever the
relatable.
narrative is for you listening. But I just had to kind of stop taking myself so seriously and stop letting the fear of man really come into mind, especially on a daily level. Like, I would be so transparent. It's not that the thoughts stop coming, but it's you stop responding to them the same way. Like, even when I was getting dressed, I was like, oh, this is a cute dress, 8 months pregnant. And then, like, my arms did the jiggle thing, and I was like, oh, I can't wear it. And I was like, what am I talking
The
about? Like,
jiggle
first of
thing, we
all,
all know what the jiggle thing is.
I was
It's
like,
so
we all
relatable.
know what the jiggle thing is. So every woman getting dressed today has probably thought that.
Oh, it's so
But I
good.
went to the pool yesterday and there was like a fit mom and she was like muscular. And I was like, I can't wait to work out again. And so I was like, oh, I started to let that one thought feed another. But you know what? I can stop it right now. And like, I just chose to laugh. And I'm someone that I wanna be put together, EB, like, I love the idea of beauty and, like, I wanna present things beautifully. I wanna, be a good representation, but I'm like, but sometimes, like, things won't be perfect, and I'm just gonna have to be okay with that, and the reality
Yeah.
is I'm like, I'm pregnant, and you know what? I'm probably storing up extra stuff here and there to be able to give nutrients to a newborn, and I'm like, that's so much more actually beautiful than, like, a perceived image of beauty. So I think once we can laugh
100%.
at things and dissect them in, like, a different way than just degrading ourselves, not even
Yes.
just with our looks, it's like, well, we find the way out if we just don't get trapped in the negative way of thinking often.
Yes. Oh, okay, well, let me ask you this. social media,
Yeah.
right? It is just this comparison trap. We all fall into it. How do we come into this space that we are totally able to bring a light in, but how do we protect our minds from this invitation of shame when all we're doing is comparing? Like, how do we champion versus compare in that sphere?
Hmm. I would say this right off the bat. I love that I get to write because I'm a much more articulate writer than speaker. So I'm like, I know there's something in the comparison chapter that would be perfect, but right now
Yes.
my brain is fried eggs. Um, so if you want a really good answer, go read the
Grab the
book. Yeah, get
book.
like the free chapter. You don't even have to buy it, whatever it is. But my real time answer for you is okay, shame and comparison. I did well, actually, I didn't do a deep dive. This book, and you probably have felt the same way when you wrote, is it's a lot of like what God was telling me and like me writing it out. And there's things that I would go back and research after the manuscript was turned in. And I was like, oh, that actually makes sense, like psychologically. And like that would have sounded really nice. But you know what? God, thank you for showing me this. Like you still helped me out of this pit. And like people get to see that in a different scale. But when we look at psychology levels of like perfectionism and shame and comparison, all of it is starts with the central idea of who we think we're supposed to be, and then which is shame essentially. Like, okay, well, I wasn't good enough to be this version of Christian. And what we do after that is we say, well, what would if God never made a mistake on me? I'm putting air quotes on that. What would that look like? And so we start to think of, well, I shouldn't have done this. I should have done it this way. And then that ball grows even more to a third layer when we start saying, oh, well, Evie does it this way, and so has that. And so what we're doing is we're feeding the same beast with different layers and making this like this onion effect that gets harder and harder to cut through. So it's not even that, oh, well, yeah, I think I might have had shame, or sometimes it's just comparison. It's like, no, it's all this snowball effect that feeds each other if you're not actually tackling things at the root. And if you hear anything with healing or with psychology, you hear this idea about there's always a root that you have to pick at, or it's just going to keep growing back. It's just going to be a weed. And so the root essentially is, well, it's not so much the person you're comparing yourself to. It's not social media is this terrible app. It's, well, how are we stewarding that? And what in our life at some point did we start to believe about how we were made that is making that so triggering to us? And for me, that was a deep dive. And there was things that even in writing, I realized things that happened to me, things that I had did, that I was like, whoa, God, I had suppressed that so far that I didn't even want to think about it. But this, I think you really do have to get alone. And some people like therapy or counseling, journaling, or just relaying to a mentor or a pastor. For me, there was a lot of times where I graduated from college. My friends were going off to the big jobs or were getting married, and I went back to my hometown and I was like, okay, I feel like a very small fish in this tank and kind of forgotten, if I'm honest. But I have this uninterrupted time where I'm not getting asked on dates. I'm starting the whole community over again, but I have a Bible. I have time alone with God. I have an empty room to be with Him. And there was so much He revealed to me in that space that I'm like, if we can do a deep dive and ask the hard questions, then maybe the annoying questions won't be so constant, and we'll actually know when to laugh at ourselves, when to figure out why something's triggering us, when to just turn to God and say, like, no, enemy, you're not going to have a foothold in this area today.
That's so good. I'm thinking about just a couple days ago, I was on social media and I was telling my husband, so-and-so this. And then, and I had kind of this tone in how I was talking. And my husband looked at me and said, you need to repent for bitterness. And I was like, whoa, we just went there. And I'm like, I just feel like you were just a little intense with me. I was just trying to. And he said, you are being bitter. And there's something there that you
Mhm.
know if you keep feeding that. I love that you even use that language of feeding the beast, because bitterness is just this magnet for shame and what you don't have and
Mm.
how you wish you were made different and you wish you had more money and you wish you could, and so it's just, and when there's this poison of bitterness in us, how are we going to grow? It's just like, oh, and so I love what you just said. Another thing that you said that I really want to unpack, and I didn't send this to you, so
That's all
I'm
right.
I'm throwing this at you from the left field, but you
Mhm.
mentioned community disappointment, and that is so real. From your perspective, you moved to a new city. There's just a lot, even personality rise, right? You're just, and before we even started recording, you and I were talking about how hard it is sometimes with the shallow end of conversation and small talk and just being like, and it's like, that's actually like my form of torture. So
Yeah.
just go, yeah. And especially when, for me, I have had these friendships where I know depth, right? And so then in new seasons, and you have new roles, you're a mom or whatever, and there's that depth lacking in, for a multitude of reasons. There's this feeling of like, ooh, and then obviously that grows sometimes into this feedback loop of shame, right? And this like concept of, oh gosh, am I so like crazy that I need like require, am I needy? Am I so, will you unpack this concept of kind of like we can't do it alone, but how do you navigate being a little disappointed in your community?
Yeah. It's that disappointment, I think, looks so different or takes on different ideas for each of us. Like, I'm thinking you and I would be the person where I was like, "Oh, well, I really opened myself up to you, and you were just, like, looking at me like I was stupid," or, "I was there for you, and you weren't there for me." Um, some other people that might be like more like extroverted and like high achieving or whatever
Yep.
realm you might be in. I'm like, well, this person just can't keep up with me. They're they got married and they don't have time and they're not fun. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, there's disappointment on all levels. Some of it, first of all, let's just get this off the bat, some of it's so valid but so uncontrollable. Like, you can't control the rate at which your friends grow. And sometimes that's because they're going into a different season and that relationship's going to look different. And then sometimes it's they're going somewhere and they're actually going to prepare you for where you're going. And so I've had to be more open with either being misunderstood in where I'm going, but honest about where I am and my expectations, and also being okay when relationships look different. I've had some maybe where it was like, "Oh, that was a big break." And, like, that person's not in my life, that kinda sucks. I feel, I feel a little villainized, but it's not up to me to, like, defend myself, and if that person's not gonna be in my life, like, I'm not on trial, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, I think that's one way I've experienced it where I was like, I invested a lot of time into that person. I feel like my character was called into question, but if this person's not in it anymore, I'm not gonna force them to be. Um, and then I've had other relationships where I'm like, "Oh, well, that person just, we didn't hit it off." I lived in Colorado for 3 years, and I was convinced that I was just not likable because we had a great ministry community, but it was our workplace, and so, like,
Of course.
different
Of
there's a different
course.
dynamic there.
Of
Um,
course.
but I was like, "Why can't I meet any friends? Like, am I just weird? At least I got my husband to marry me before he found out I was weird." And
Well, how did that disappointment bleed into how you viewed yourself and shame you were battling? Like, right? Because I think community will sometimes expose inner shame dialogue, right?
Yeah, and it'll affect the way that you interact with other people. Like, I started interacting with my husband out of this need and dependency because, one, I was looking for him to invalidate my fears and tell me, "Oh, no, you're
Totally.
not. You're not weird. You're the most amazing woman. That's why I
Yes.
married you." And he could
Totally.
say that. He there was sometimes, bless his heart, I can say that now that I live in the South again. Um, he would just be like, "Oh, no, we're gonna find the right people. I married you because you're this. You're a woman of God." I'm like, "Okay, I don't believe you."
Yeah, you're saying that because you have to say
Yeah,
that.
it created a codependency a little bit, which also was just inevitable because, he lived in his hometown, I moved halfway across the country. I was
Right,
like, "I don't
right.
know anything or anyone." Um, But then the shame too is like I was less confident when we would go speak places. I was less confident in the message I was sharing because I'm like, well, who am I running through this with? And like, am I believing who I'm called to be? But then I watched as honestly as his and I's relationship grew, it strengthened a lot of stuff within me that was more of, I'm thankful for some of the things that let me turn this down so you can hear me better. I'm thankful for some of the things that I got to work out. I mentioned that time of being isolated at home. And I feel like God did a lot of stuff for me character wise then, but then he did even more for me in that first like year of marriage, which is just, inevitable.
Just a master class of
But I'm a better friend because of some of the things I walked through with my husband. And so I think if you are experiencing some of that disappointment, or you're like looking for your people, it's like, okay, well, how can if you're single and you want to be a wife, if you're friendless and you want to be a good friend, what are you cultivating within yourself to be that person? Some of it, like, I'm sorry, it'll just come through trial and error. Like, you don't know how. I always say this. I love that I was a bridesmaid before I was a bride. No, wait, no, hold on. I said that wrong. I wish I would have been a bride before I was a bridesmaid because I didn't know how to show up for my friends on their wedding day until I knew what they were going through, and how much was really on the line for that person. So, like, I'm
yeah,
such a better
that
bridesmaid now
makes
that I've been a bride.
right.
I was such a better, like, wannabe doula for my sister because I'd gone through birth before. And so, like, there's all
Yes,
these things where it's like, well, we can get upset about it, but let's take that disappointment and think, okay, well, what did I wish that friend would have been for me? Or what do I feel like is lacking? And how can I fuel that better when I'm on the other side of that? And what am I really looking for? What do I need? Because
yeah,
I don't need someone to hang out with every Friday night just to do something, but I need people to challenge me and call me and sharpen me. I'm not going to do that for someone, and I'm not going to receive that if I'm not actually letting God do that already. So it's twofold. It's like there's a
it is.
reality to like, okay, let people grow, challenge them, be there for them. If they walk away, you can't help that. If you're in different seasons, don't let that alienate you either. But then also just keep being a good person. You'll be a good friend.
Yes. Well, let me ask you this then. How do you come to a place where you identify the people that you are going to open up a shame cycle, an insecurity, a struggle? How do you identify who those safe people are and like grow that equity in that relationship where all of a sudden when they start to declare truth over you, you do start to believe it in just the friendship dynamic?
Yeah. Not everyone would probably agree with this, but I'm very much a quality over quantity person. I don't, especially in the season of raising littles, I don't have capacity to have that deep of a relationship that you need to cultivate and foster something like that safely well with a bunch of people. But
Yeah.
I do have capacity and I do need that with a few key people. So I think what you said is key is like identify the right ones, but don't go spilling it out to like all of your friends. Like there are different levels of friendship. There's different times that you're closest with other people. That doesn't mean that they always walk away. But there's friends that have walked with me through really hard seasons in the past that are still like my people, but don't know
Yes.
some of the harder things that I've had to go through the
Sure.
last 2 years. But
Sure.
what I look at if I'm trying to evaluate, well, is this a person I feel safe with? Is one, like have some congruency with them, have some commonality, have a little bit of a track record. I think right now we're in this emotional dumping ground where it's like, well, I just need to share my story and I need to be understood. And especially like even in like dating, is we're seeing this and we're opening our hearts to people and wondering why we feel hurt. We're hurting ourselves more by just like we're kind of being naked instead of vulnerable and just saying like I'm hurt, someone come help. But like you need to find, okay, well, who am I going to be vulnerable with and when is the right time? Like
Yeah.
I remember my first time with my husband because we had set a time where we were committed to each other and we were in a space that could foster that. And so when
Yeah.
we're having those relationships, I like to see like is this someone that they're authentic with me. That doesn't mean they have had to tell me their entire life story yet, but what they tell me is true. When they say they're going to do something, they do it. Like, we're able to commit to each other. And there's grace. I got to stop right there. There's grace for that, especially as moms. I'm
Of
like, sometimes
course.
the baby gets sick. But
Of course. But what I hear you saying is like identifying who they are, having that equal commitment to each other's sharpening.
Mhm.
And so that's why when they do say, "Hey, Christian, I feel like the last couple times we've hung out, I've sensed this criticalness about you. And I know how much you love uh, when XYZ, but there's something critical in you. And I just want to I want to be with you in it." And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, there's enough equity in this relationship where she's saying something. I'm like, oh, okay.
Mm,
Thank you. Wow. Thank you for saying that.
yeah.
And then that's when you get to, sharpen each other. And then, so I just love that you say that. Also, I think it's beautiful because when you have that congruency, like you said, there's less space for the shame to kind of take over the dialogue, because
Yeah.
when you are emotionally throw up on someone that maybe wasn't the wisest person to open up with, of course you're going to come back with, "Oh wow, I didn't think that one through. You're really dumb."
Yeah.
And then
And
right.
then you
And
won't
so
share with the right people.
100%. And then it's like,
I
yeah.
I
So,
will add one thing onto that. I didn't share this as much at the beginning, but I'm a Bevere, which means that we're in a great large family that's all doing amazing things, and within that, there is inevitable internal and external comparison,
of course.
and inevitably, or someone's like, "Oh, you're the one that did that." I was like, "No, I'm not that one.
The other one.
That's her." But with friendships, it's like I can meet someone and they're like, "Oh my gosh, your sister-in-law was amazing." Like that, and then something within me is like, "Well, I can be amazing. Like I can be your friend." I'm like, "Why?" Like I can be your acquaintance. I could love you well, but I don't have to be. I know Paul says to be all things to all people, but I'm like, I can't, Paul. Maybe because you were, a single man at the time. I can't be all things to all people. So I can be loving, I can be kind, I can be friendly. But if I'm going to be transparent and honest and deep and there for someone, I'm okay with having my group, and I'm okay
100%.
with giving myself fully to a few people and liking who I am to others.
Yeah, I think that's just guarding, right?
Yeah.
Guarding who's going to have access to your heart and who's going to actually get to walk with you in really sacred and hard struggles, the
Mhm.
good, the bad. Yeah, I'm right with you. A couple of days ago, you posted about perfectionism, and I really related to that. Let me plug my computer in. It's plugged in, but for some reason, it's saying it's about to die.
Uh-oh.
Okay, there we go. That wasn't all the way in the outlet. You were talking about perfectionism, and I relate to that because that is something all of my ride or dies, husband especially, will say to me. They'll be like, "EB, you have the most critical spirit of anyone I know, especially when it comes to myself," right? I'll be like, "No, it can be better. It can be this." And I have a hard time with that tension between um, holy and hard work and
Mhm.
having something be perfect. I think that's that wing 3 showing, right?
Yeah.
So like you, especially with someone who loves interior design. And so there is kind of a measurable view of perfectionism in a room, right? Or how do you come to a place where you're able to actually sit and be satisfied with, wow, this was really holy work. It's not perfect, but I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
And not buy into that narrative of, okay, wow, you really, that's what you did. And this, and just letting that kind of mind talk take over.
Yeah. It's so different too. I love that you mentioned interior design because when I'm writing something versus producing something, it's so different because I see in interior stuff how quickly people interact with it. And at one point that can be really validating, oh, I did it perfect. Or it could be really humbling. Like the last 24 hours, I think even I was walking through my home last night and my husband jokes that as soon as we got married, he couldn't go to sleep without doing the dishes or I get mad at him. I'm the person where I'm like, well, I need it to be clean before I can rest. And I need it to be beautiful. I want to finish the project. And some of that I'm really thankful for. I'm thankful for the hard work side, as you alluded to. But there's this this tension between excellence and perfection that I think we have to understand, especially if we're doing anything, like if you're in ministry, you're doing anything for the Lord, or even if you're not in ministry, like if you're just creating something, it's like, how do you really know the guardrails between the both of those? But I was walking through my house, everyone was asleep, and I was like, oh, the house looks great. And then I thought, there is how I foster this home, the environment, aside from the looks, the environment. I don't want this to be a stale place for my family. Like, I want this to be a place where it's clean and organized so we can function well. We feel at home, we feel peace, but it's not stale where it's rigid or it's hard. And I want that to be my spirit as well. Is I want to present this beautiful invitation to people when they meet me, you know, audibly, emotionally, like whatever it is. But I don't want it to be rigid where I feel like I can't flow, or a place of, well, Holy Spirit, interrupt, or, well, it was inviting, but I didn't like what I was invited into, because there's this hardness, right? So for me, I've had to learn the process of just simply, what's the difference in excellence and what's perfection? And excellence is what I can do with my very best effort, the skill I have, the mindset, the wisdom. And then perfection is always going to be the things that I wish I could have added. And maybe those weren't mine to add. Maybe that was for someone else to come along and do, or maybe that was to keep me from even doing something because I never thought it was quite ready, right? So I'm trying to be more excellent than perfect. And then in
That's a
my
word right
mind,
there.
it's really hard.
That's a word. That's so
I need
good.
to go to the dictionary and be like, "Okay, excellence, perfection," when
Well,
because they like to mimic each other.
it's so relatable, and the enemy will try and convince us that when, because in your caption, you talked about how perfectionism is shame with a mask on, right?
Mhm.
And it's just the enemy will try and tell us, like, oh gosh, like that was not done well. Like, why did,
Why
ooh,
even bother? Why do you think you can
why
do this?
even
Yeah.
bother? Yeah. It's just, oh, it just takes over. And I think, I guess one of my last questions for you is, how do you tune, the way you tune a radio, how do you tune your mind to the voice of Christ when you are bombarded with so many lies in so many different seasons? Because it's like, you wrote a book on overcoming shame, but that doesn't mean you're never going to struggle. So, how, for listeners, how do they say, okay, I'm struggling? Like, how do I actually attach my mind to Christ in this shameful moment?
Yeah. It's so funny recording back-to-back episodes, because I was like, "I said this already, but maybe it was in the other episode. Maybe I already said it here." But, I we really have to be interruptible and preemptive. Like, I find the mornings that I wake up, like, when I wake up, first thing I do is I make myself not get on my phone, or, like, I check the baby monitor, which is on my phone, and I'm like, "Okay, not Instagram, not anything else. Put it
Yep.
aside, go get in the shower." And the shower is a place where I'm like, it's silent. I really ask God, like, "What are you speaking?" And then we do our Bible time. It's so easy for me, Evie, to go through the rhythms and be like, "Okay, well, I read my Bible, I did my verse, I did all this stuff," and then go straight to the things of, "Well, I'm gonna tackle this today. I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna see so and so." And when I do that, it's much easier for the shame to compound and get in there, and like the busyness of life. But it's so much easier for me to have those interruptible moments where God's asking me the questions of, okay, well, is your home stale or is it inviting? Is your spirit open or is it closed? And so I think if we want to not be bombarded, we have to be able to be open. Like, when we're closed, that's when things get trapped. We're going to be
Yeah.
bombarded if all of this stuff came in and now it's trapped in there. But if we're open, we're saying, God, I
Yes.
need you to speak into this. You even said this when we were talking earlier on the other episode, but invite God into the process, into the thinking, into the reasoning. And it's a cliche of an answer to be like, well, start your day with Christ and then you won't be struggling. But um,
Sure.
things come. They totally come. And so how are you preemptively planning for that? I'm a planner by nature.
Me too.
So
Yeah.
that's just my response. But it's really true. And if you're struggling with shame specifically, if you're like, okay, yes, I feel like I've been on this perfection loop, maybe it's not even with things I'm doing, but I thought I would be here at this stage in my life, or I just wish my family dynamic would look like this. I wish I could have those challenging conversations with my husband, but we can't even talk to each other. Like, he doesn't understand me. The most liberating thing that I felt is releasing the narrative. Like, I can't tell you how deeply, and I know you'll understand this, how deeply my soul wants to be seen and understood and valued for like the shell of a person that I am. But even the people that know me best and have the best intentions of understanding me will not understand me when I'm a mess inside, because that's not who I am. And
Yes.
so I have to be open to being real with where I'm at, and giving people the grace, giving myself the grace to get it wrong, but to still keep trying. Like, I have to
Mm.
release the track records and the disappointments daily and just say, okay, well, if I want to be this sheltered person that's worth the people in my life discovering, how do I just continue to excavate the dirt? Like, excavate, and continue to refine what's within. And it's not about, I have to be this perfect gold that's discoverable, but I have to be
Mm.
to the process of finding gold.
Yes, that's so good. I just, it's like actually allowing your mind to be consumed and just possessed by the mind of Christ. Like, how are we going to know who we are when we don't know who he is?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we can just set our gaze on just who he is, and so then when you're, especially people who are listening to this and they're like, no, but you don't know what I did. You don't know my story. You know, it's like all this beautiful thing between two girls who have it all together, but you don't know. And it's like,
We've said
but
that.
we have said that. I'm the queen of you don't get it. Okay. But also, do you really believe that the blood of Christ could cover that shame? Do you
Mhm.
really believe that Calvary actually, like death and resurrection, for you to be insecure? No, he died so you have freedom.
Yeah.
And freedom, when you experience the who Christ is in this actual intentional and intimate way, we get less in this obsession with, oh, I'm so insecure and I'm not enough and I just wish, and it's, oh, you are this and you are this and you are this. And then that's when we're kinder with ourselves. We're kinder with the people that we're talking in relationship with,
Mhm.
where there's that fruit of confidence, there's that fruit of hope. So then you're able to, you understand counterfeit thoughts. And then all of a sudden when they come in, you're like, nope,
Yeah.
that has no value.
Mhm.
So yeah, I know you walk this, and I'm so thankful that you have a voice of authority to walk women through
Oh, thank you.
just, yeah, binding themselves to Christ in a
Well,
world that does not.
I'm such a visual person, so I wonder if this can help anyone that feels like this is all good, but it's kind of a lot, or it's overarching. My son is obsessed with anything with wheels right now. It's just the 2-year-old thing, but he
Totally.
loves trains, calls them choo-choos. And like, what I want you to envision, if you're like, yes, I'm stuck in shame, or I'm stuck in the cycle, or just negative, whatever it is, I want you to imagine when that starts to bombard you and it feels overwhelming, just imagine like a train going by. And then you have the opportunity for a second train to come right beside it. And I want you to literally, in your mind, just imagine jumping to the other train. And like, that's what I do when shame's coming and saying, "Oh, you're just so terrible. I can't believe you're doing this again. I can't believe you're having this temptation." Or, "Wow, you said that. That was so stupid." Jump off that train into the next one. The next one is
Yep.
grace, where, okay, we're going to try this differently. I'm going to laugh at my mistakes. I'm going to humble myself in joy.
Yes.
And then I'm gonna
Yes.
say, "Where is this train going? Like, what do I learn
Yes.
from this? Okay, I said
Yes.
something stupid. Do I need to apologize? Do I
Right.
need to, just brush it off because it wasn't a big deal?" Like, if you stay on
Right.
the other train, you're gonna think, "Oh, well, I'm stupid. I can't talk to that person." You're gonna have a hurt relationship. You're gonna hurt your mind. You could let this person just leave it up to what they assume, but like, "Oh, actually, I have the chance to apologize. I can go apologize to my
I
husband,
love
or
that.
I can take my foot out of my mouth. I'm not feeling great about the way I look. I can realize that this is for a season. I can change my diet. I can go, like, there's so much power that happens when we jump out of the loop we're on and out of our minds and just think, okay, what's truth and what can I do about it?"
I love that. I love the concept. I also love that you're even mentioning being gracious with yourself, because I am not that by nature.
Oh,
And
would be a surprise to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though I
I
really would.
oh no, I'm not gracious at all to myself. And sometimes that does bleed into other people where I will
Yeah.
put my critical tendencies on other people. But gosh, just being gracious with ourselves is such a key part of being able to have that sustainable confidence with who Christ is and who we're called to be. And oh man, Christian, I'm just so thankful for you.
Oh my gosh. Likewise. You are such a deep well, and I can't wait to see all the things that you keep doing and stewarding in this
Oh,
space and others. So
well, where can people find you? Where can people buy your book? All the things.
they can find me. I'm usually on Instagram, even when I'm trying to get off of it more. I'm at Miss Christian Bevere, because Christian Bevere was taken by a guy. Always is. And, they can find the podcast on relationships, if that's the season you're in or something you want more information on navigating singleness or praying for your future husband, which is our whole idea there at Dear Future Husband podcast, or the Instagram. And yeah, the book's called Break Up With What Broke You. Can't believe it's a year old.
When you posted that, I was like, look at how itty bitty your baby is. It's so
I
crazy to
know.
think that you released a book when he was like so itty bitty.
Oh my gosh, I have photos of me turning in the manuscript with him like a month old on me, and I was like, oh,
You are hardcore.
that was a hard season, but how precious is it now? And like, can we
I
just go
can't imagine.
back?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Evie.
Isn't she lovely? Oh my goodness. If you haven't already, make sure you go to Amazon right now and grab her book, Break Up With What Broke You. I know that you will love it. And just to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You, again, listen to this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed or follow this on Spotify, Apple podcasts, all of the different platforms. And if you have a minute, it means so much when you rate these episodes or you leave comments, or if something that we shared spoke to you, please tag me on Instagram. It just blesses me. Honestly, sometimes when you're doing these things, you're like, Lord, would you send encouragement that people are getting something from these things? And so it really, really goes a long way when you share what parts of these episodes ministered to you. And so I hope the rest of your week goes amazing, and we will see you next week on the Let Me Ask You This podcast.